like Deja Kelly and others that want to get this thing done and want to play games. So for you to say everybody's on the same page was a complete lie. Now, here's Adam Silver. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said Tuesday night he is tracking WNBA collective bargaining sessions very closely and that he and Deputy Commissioner Mark Tatum would both be willing to join the prolonged negotiations to finalize a deal. That means when Mark Tatum is getting involved, the guy I put in the thumbnail.
Adam Silver has stepped directly into the WNBA's collective bargaining talks, and he isn't acting as a neutral mediator. The NBA commissioner made his stance clear. Players need to compromise so games can be played. That message should sound familiar. It's the same position Caitlin Clark took 2 weeks ago when she broke from the Players Association. Now, the most powerful figure in professional basketball is backing that view, while the league's co-founders are scrambling to keep their off-season venture from unraveling.
And Silver also said he has great relationships with many of the players and believes the sides are on course for a solution. The current 40-day extension ends January 9th, and that date is fastly approaching. Okay, he says, I remain optimistic we'll get something done, but whether that means I'm physically sitting at the table for the negotiation, Silver said. And again, I speak for Mark as well. We have been involved with this league for 3 decades. In essence, I care enormously about it and want it to be successful, and I want the players to feel fairly treated as well. And I realize there's been a disconnect, especially over the last few months in these negotiations.
What makes Silver's involvement so important isn't just that he offered assistance, it's how he framed the solution. He said both sides must find common ground and that compromise is necessary. He also acknowledged that WNBA players deserve more money as the league grows, but notice what was left unsaid. There was no reference to the 50-50 revenue split the Players Association is demanding. Silver focused on higher dollar amounts, not percentage-based revenue sharing. That's a direct rejection of the union's core negotiating framework. The timing matters. Silver made these comments on December 17th at the NBA Cup Finals in Las Vegas. The current CBA extension expires on January 9th, leaving just 3 weeks to close a gap sources describe as significant. Players are seeking 30% of league revenue. The WNBA is offering 15%.
We want and how we feel. And now let's get to the actual video so we can get more dialogue of what Breanna Stewart had to say. They trying to hardball. The owners aren't going to give in to all this nonsense. They're trying to hardball. These players are. And at the end of the day, Adam Silver is with Caitlin Clark. Y'all need to compromise and get this damn deal done and stop playing games.
Hey, Stewie. Good to see you. I had 2 questions. The first, Adam Silver spoke ahead of the Cup and said that if necessary, he'd be up for coming to the bargaining table, him and Mark Tatum. I'm just wondering, do you think that would be beneficial? Would there be value to having Adam's presence at the bargaining table?
Watch Breanna Stewart's response closely. She says what they're doing right now isn't getting them anywhere. Translation: the Players Association's hardline strategy has failed. They opted out of the CBA in October, expecting the league to fold on revenue sharing. Instead, they've burnt through 2 extensions, watched the league announce expansion plans without them, and now face the reality of the NBA commissioner potentially sitting across the negotiating table. Stewart says she'd welcome Adam Silver joining the talks, but pay attention to how she frames it. She wants to make sure everyone understands what the players want and how they feel. That's not the language of someone confident in their leverage. That's someone hoping Silver will pressure ownership to concede. Except Silver has already shown his position. He's not coming to force a 50-50 split. He's coming to force a compromise that gets games played.
What we're doing right now isn't really getting us anywhere, so if that means that Adam and Mark need to come to the table, we're more than happy to have that, and just making sure everybody understands what we want and how we feel, and realizing that both things can be true together. Everybody can agree and get what they want out of this, but there has to be some I don't know, mutual, some things in common happening first. So yeah, if Adam wants to come, I would love to have.
This is where things get complicated for the players. Stewart admits both things can be true at the same time, and that everyone can get what they want. But then she says something mutual has to happen first. Think about what that actually means. The Players Association spent 2 months insisting revenue sharing was non-negotiable. They mocked Silver's October comments about absolute dollars versus percentages on social media. They framed this as a fight for equity and fairness. Now, their most visible leader is publicly acknowledging that compromise requires both sides to give ground. That's a significant retreat from the union's public stance. It also creates a problem for players like Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, who founded Unrivaled, because the longer these negotiations drag on, the clearer it becomes that this fight isn't benefiting all players equally.
It was announced, and the season is going to run from fall to April, which is in direct competition with Unrivaled. What were your immediate thoughts when you heard about Project B? And what's the long-term answer for the landscape of women's basketball? Is it to have one premier league? Is it to continue developing all of these leagues? Like, what is truly the answer? What is the ideal world for the women's basketball landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think my immediate thoughts when I saw Project B, I was kind of like, well, they saw what worked. You know, they saw the success that we had here at Unrivaled, and they wanted to be a part of that in their own way and try to do it. But at the same time, knowing, what.
This is the moment that exposes the real fracture. Stewart is asked about Project B, the new 3-on-3 league scheduled to run from fall through April. That timeline puts it in direct competition with Unrivaled's winter window. Watch how she responds. She says Project B saw what worked at Unrivaled and wanted to be part of it in their own way. Then she pivots to praising Unrivaled, the equity stake, the resources, keeping players in one city, but pay attention to what she leaves out. She doesn't acknowledge that Project B's schedule actually fits the WNBA calendar better. She doesn't mention that players who want to stay overseas and still return for a full WNBA season now have another option. Instead, she dismisses Project B as imitation and redirects the conversation back to Unrivaled's advantages. That isn't analysis. That's marketing. And it exposes the conflict of interest that has driven these negotiations from the start.
But just making sure the resources, people are staying in one city. Yeah, we'll have like a tour stop in Philly this year, but making sure that we're prioritizing players and their bodies and their health. And as for a long-term solution, I don't know the answer, because it's like now you have all these options. You have Unrivaled, you have WNBA potentially happening in its normal season.
Listen closely to this part again. Stewart says if the WNBA season isn't cohesive with everything else, then everything can't happen together. So there needs to be a world where everyone agrees. Then she admits they're not there yet, and that her focus right now is Unrivaled. That's the problem, summed up in one answer. The Players Association is supposed to negotiate on behalf of all WNBA players. But the players leading those negotiations are also running a competing league that benefits from a shorter WNBA season and needs the winter months protected. Caitlin Clark called this out 3 weeks ago when she said players need to compromise because games need to be played. The implication was clear. Some players are prioritizing their off-season ventures over the league that employs them. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert claimed all players were on the same page. That wasn't true. Players like Deja Kelly and others publicly supported Clark's position. And now Adam Silver is stepping in because negotiations have stalled precisely because of this conflict.
Rated at the league office, Silver said ahead of NBA Cup final in Las Vegas. I talk to the people who are at the negotiating table on a daily basis, and I've said before, we, the NBA, WNBA collective, acknowledge that our players deserve to be paid significantly more than they have so far based on the increased success of the league, and it's just a question now of finding a meeting of the minds in terms of what is.
Here's what happens next. Silver said both he and Deputy Commissioner Mark Tatum are willing to join the negotiations. And when Mark Tatum gets involved, that tells you the NBA is treating this as a serious business problem. Tatum oversees league operations and international strategy. He doesn't step into routine labor talks. He shows up when deals are at risk and the league needs to protect its investment. The WNBA is in the middle of historic expansion. Golden State joins next season, with Toronto and Portland coming in 2026. The league just signed new media deals worth $2.2 billion over 11 years, starting in 2025. They cannot afford a work stoppage or a fractured relationship with players during this growth phase. But they also can't set a precedent where a league that still operates at a loss gives up control through a 50-50 revenue split. So Silver isn't coming to negotiate or explore ideas. He's coming to impose a solution, a compromise that gets games played and allows the league to move forward. That compromise will include meaningful salary increases. It will likely improve travel standards and benefits. It may even include some form of revenue sharing tied to profitability benchmarks instead of gross revenue. What it will not include is the Players Association's demand for 30% of revenue regardless of the league's finances, and that's why this matters for Caitlin Clark. She broke ranks with the union because she understood this reality. The WNBA's growth is real, but it's fragile. The league has to capitalize on this moment with maximum games and maximum exposure. Anything that threatens the season or creates negative headlines puts that growth at risk. Clark understands this because she's driving the growth. Her games averaged 1.2 million viewers this season. Without her, the league averaged around 400,000. That she isn't being selfish by calling for compromise. She's being realistic about where the leverage actually is. Silver sees the same thing. That's why he talked about increased success and absolute dollar increases instead of revenue percentages. He's acknowledging that players deserve more money because the league is growing while making clear that growth is measured in dollars, not formulas. The WNBA brought in roughly $200 million in revenue this season. 30% of that is $60 million split among 144 players, about $417,000 per player on average. And that's before operating costs, team expenses, expansion investments, and facilities. The math doesn't work at 30%. It barely works at 15% under the league's current structure. Silver knows this because the NBA went through the same evolution. The NBA didn't reach 50-50 revenue sharing until it was wildly profitable with decades of financial stability. The WNBA is in year 28 and only now turning the corner on sustainability. Demanding NBA-level revenue splits now is like demanding a penthouse when you just moved out of your parents' basement. But the Players Association boxed itself in by framing this as an equity issue instead of an economic one. They made it about fairness rather than feasibility. Now they can't back down without appearing to cave. That's why Kathy Engelbert claimed all players were on the same page. That wasn't true. She needed the appearance of unity because once that cracks, the entire strategy falls apart, and it already cracked. Caitlin Clark cracked it. Then players who actually want to play basketball cracked it further. Now Adam Silver is preparing to shatter it by forcing both sides to accept reality. The reality is players deserve more money. The reality is also that the league can't pay them based on revenue percentages that ignore profitability. Compromise means accepting both at the same time. Watch what happens over the next 3 weeks. Either the Players Association accepts a deal with significant raises, but no revenue sharing, or Silver and Tatum walk into that room and impose a framework neither side loves, but both can survive. That's what compromise actually looks like. Not everyone getting what they want, everyone getting something they can live with so the league can move forward. Breanna Stewart said her focus right now is unrivaled. That tells you why these negotiations stalled. The players who should be most invested in maximizing WNBA growth are focused on their side venture. The players invested in the league's growth, like Caitlin Clark, are calling for compromise. And the commissioner is siding with Clark while preparing to force a resolution. This isn't about right or wrong. It's about understanding the moment. The WNBA has momentum for the first time in its history, driven largely by one player bringing casual fans into a league they ignored for decades. Those fans don't care about CBAs or revenue formulas. They care about watching Caitlin Clark play. Any disruption risks losing them instantly. That's the leverage. That's why Silver is stepping in. January 9th is 3 weeks away. The clock is ticking. One way or another, there will be a deal. The only question is whether the Players Association accepts it voluntarily or has it imposed. Based on Stewart's comments, they're starting to realize the leverage they thought they had isn't there. Now we'll see if they take the win available or hold out for the win they wanted.